Oh hey, it's Wes, and today I've got a whole bunch of gimbals in front of me again, so I think you know what that means. We have a new gimbal, and as always, I'm gonna ask that question, do we really need another gimbal? I think we might end up with a different answer today, but no spoilers, let's get right into it. We're talking about the Moza Mini MX. So let's get into it, starting with the build quality. So number one, we have another plastic build. It's getting to be pretty much the usual thing for these things to be made out of the lightest weight plastic that they possibly can. But it's not that light. This clocks in at 412 grams. Compared to one of our more recent looks, which was the Hohem iSteady X, this is only 259 grams. This weighs a lot more. And you can kind of see where it's coming from if you look down at the bottom of these. You can see that the Moza has a much larger handle because there's more battery inside there. And we'll get back to what that means to us soon. And compared to, still up until now at least, my favorite small size form factor gimbal, the Smooth Q2, which is an all metal construction, it weighs almost as much. However, functionally, the Q2 still feels like it weighs more because a lot of that weight is up here in the gimbal area where there's a lot of metal, whereas much of the weight in the Moza is down here in the battery grip. So although it weighs almost the same, it does actually feel lighter in the hand. I have to admit that. Overall though, it is plasticky, feels pretty robust, but although the plastic is textured, I don't like it. It's slippery. Not quite bar of soap slippery like the earlier versions of gimbals, but it doesn't feel great in the hand. What I recommend, if you have a gimbal that you love, especially if we're talking about big expensive gimbals. Now this isn't the most expensive, but this is the Weebill S. It's great for mirrorless cameras. And I like to use it with two handles. So it comes with this tripod slash handle. It's got a nice grip on it. Somewhat leathery, and it's pretty grippy. You can buy another one of these for a fair chunk of change because this is all metal, or you can buy one of these cheap little aluminum grips. Now originally this was a super slippery, slick piece of aluminum, but you can buy tennis racket grips. Previously I talked about using like hockey tape or something. That's the cheap way of doing it. But you can buy a leather grip for a tennis racket and wrap it around anything that you like. So if you have one of these small gimbals that you love and use a lot, spend 10-20 bucks, get a proper grip wrapped around it. I'll have some links in the description about that. But this feels great in the hand. You're not gonna drop this, and if your hands get all sweaty, this is made of leather, so it's not gonna get all gross either like some sort of a vinyl or plastic will on a long day of shooting. Love that. Back to the task at hand though. Overall, the build quality, it's solid, it's not metal, it's a little bit heavy. I don't think it's gonna break very easily at all. I'm gonna give this an 8 out of 10. Moving on to the feature set, and really the features and the interface are pretty much the only things that differentiate these nowadays. We have a standard 3-axis gimbal, no surprises there. And we also have a much larger battery. We're talking about a 20-hour maximum runtime versus what is normally 6 to 8 hours on these gimbals. It's an interesting choice that they made. Your phone is not going to be recording for 20 hours without needing to be charged. And as far as I know, you can't charge your phone from this. There's just the USB-C charging port on it. There's no secondary one like the old larger gimbals used to have. So that's one big differentiator. On the gimbal itself, we don't have an awful lot of buttons. We have a joystick that doesn't press, we have a power button, we've got the trigger button, and we have 2 zoom knobs right here. Not a lot going on, and there is only one LED on the front of the gimbal here. Additionally, in the box, it comes with a tiny tripod that can extend the grip. Or does it? Normally they go on here, but this one ends up giving you a second grip. Now, I'm not sure that this is really necessary for just a cell phone gimbal. It reminds me a lot of, and that's why I brought this out, the dual hand grip that you often get with the larger camera gimbals. So you can hold it from two angles and really stabilize it. I don't see that that's really necessary here. So when you set it down on the tripod, the handle sticks out from behind. I don't know, it's different. I guess different is fun. I'll talk more about the app features when I get to the interface section, which is coming next. But overall, it has a lot of the usual features. And also, you have wireless firmware updating. Why am I mentioning that? Well, on the Q2, it's a pain to update. You have to do it through the computer. It doesn't work well for me. So overall, it has a decent feature set. It's missing a couple of things that others have that I don't care that much about. I'm gonna give it an 8 out of 10. All right, here's the big section, its interface. And that's where these things really set themselves apart from each other. So let's snap in here. All right, now we're on. Okay, as is always the case, I don't know why this has to be required. You have to download the proprietary software to get this thing going. Once again, this makes me furious. I should just be able to turn this thing on and have it operate. Having to register my unique device identifier, collect some data from my phone home to the manufacturer, it is completely needless. There's no reason to be doing this, and until people stop doing it, I'm going to keep taking points off for interface. I cannot wait to see another one of these gimbals come out that doesn't harvest my data as much as it can. It's ridiculous. The interface itself is actually super clean compared to the ones from Zhiyun and Hohem. So I like that. There's not a lot of kitschy stuff in here. So you have your settings on one side. There's a nice clean interface. You can go in and change your camera settings. This unfortunately still suffers from a glitch that I have with other manufacturers as well. Every time I start this up, it goes back to 1080, 30 FPS. I prefer to be at 1080, 60 FPS. I don't know why it keeps defaulting back to that. It drives me nuts. Maybe they'll fix that with a firmware update. There are a lot of settings in here. You can go into full manual mode, which is great. In that full manual mode, you can adjust your shutter speed, not your aperture, obviously, because we have fixed apertures here. You can adjust your ISO. So that's great to be able to use that and lock things down. And if you click over here to the magical effects, yes, we have all those weird effects. Actually, way more than I'd like. And much similar to the Hohem app, it plays music as you're going through it. It's annoying. I don't like playing with that stuff. And you can go in your gimbal settings. There's a sport gear mode, which makes this super fast, like ridiculously fast. You can change your joystick speed. Now, when we go into the follow mode, we don't have quite as many options as usual. There's pan follow, pan and tilt, and FPV. That's about it. I'm fine with this. As I said before, it doesn't have a lot of extra modes. Those are the only modes that I use anyway, so that's fine. There's a problem that I keep having that seems to be getting worse with every new gimbal that comes out. They try to make them smaller, try to make them cheaper. We get less buttons and less feedback. So on this, again, we just have one LED and some buttons that are very multifunction. So strap in, I'm going to talk about these buttons. Number one, you have the power button. Hold that down to turn it on, turn it off. If you tap that button, it's a record button. If you double tap that button, it switches from video to still mode. You have the zoom and function mode buttons. If you tap those buttons, it switches you between pan follow, pan and tilt with the top button, and the bottom button switches between FPV mode and your pan follow modes. If you hold down this button, it slowly zooms. If you hold down the other button, it slowly zooms out. If you double tap the button, it does the full zoom range. If you double tap it back, it does the full zoom back. We're not quite done yet. If you hold down the trigger button, you get in lock mode, where it doesn't move at all. It does a great job of that. Double tap this button, you recalibrate, go back to center. Triple tap this button, you're looking at yourself, it goes into selfie mode. And switch back again. All the while, this LED is nothing except for a battery indicator lamp. So it's not telling you much. It's It's not a very bright LED either. When you're out in direct sunlight, it's hard to see it. So unless you're using the app, you don't know what's going on with this. So if you want to use a third-party app like Filmic Pro to get a higher bit rate, you're not going to be getting very far. You're not going to know what's going on with this. I hate that they don't add mode buttons, mode LEDs on this. It drives me nuts. It's very confusing. Back to the zoom features. Once again, like the other gimbals, when you zoom on this, it's only using one lens. As you can see, I have 3 lenses. In the settings, yes, I can, in my camera mode, switch between ultra-wide, wide-angle, telephoto. I can do that easily in the camera settings, but when I'm within a certain camera on my phone, it will only zoom digitally inside that camera. I don't know if Apple just doesn't have the API opened up for that. That's unfortunate that we just get really terrible digital zoom. Going through the interface here, we have access to all of our features pretty easily. And also I don't know if you're supposed to do this, you can hold the side of the gimbal because it's right where your thumb is going to be as you work through these modes here. My favorite advancement in the interface on this is the advanced time-lapse mode. You can take this, you position the gimbal where you want, you add a spot, add another spot, add another spot, and then you go to the next step, and you can set the parameters for this time lapse, and then it will go through the time lapse. It is super easy to use, very intuitive. I've found time lapses to be very confusing and annoying on the other ones. You don't know which way it's going to go sometimes, and it's hard to predict how it's going to work. This one, honestly, it's my favorite part of this gimbal, and it works great to do time lapses. This is what this gimbal is best at. So overall, the interface, you got the mandatory phoning home. It's a little bit convoluted, but simplified more than the others. So overall, I'm gonna give that a 6 out of 10. And yes, we lost a lot of points because of that registration requirement. Stabilization. Not a lot to say here. 3-axis, pretty standard. It works well. Big problem here. If I go to my ultra-wide camera, I can see the motor. And there's no way that I can tilt this to not see the motor. And if I go upside down, oh boy, I see the whole arm. This has somewhat limited application use here. Additionally, similar to the Hohem iSteady X, you have somewhat limited vertical range of motion. It's a little bit better than on the iSteady X, but I have to show you here. If I strap this in to the Smooth Q, I have an enormous vertical range of motion. The arms don't get in the way. Now, additionally, on my ultra-wide I can see this, but if I tilt it, it's gone. The stabilization isn't as good when you have it tilted like this, but it gives you the option. So if you're looking for range of motion, the Q2 still just destroys the competition. But it comes at a cost. It doesn't get that motor out of the way as easily.
You have torn apart the sea. You have led me through the deep. Hallelujah. Hallelujah. Night by day is a sign that you are with me. The fire by night is a guiding light to my feet. You found me, you freed me, held back the waters from my release. Oh Yahweh, 'cause you're the God who fights for me, Lord of every victory. Hallelujah, hallelujah. You have torn apart the sea, you have led me through the deep. Hallelujah, hallelujah. You're the God.
So there you have it, stabilization, it's good, but doesn't have the full range of motion. It's an 8 out of 10. value. And this is really where these things are where these things are really competing hard. And this is where we run into a bit of a problem here. If we take this guy, which is $90, and pit it up against the Hohem iSteady X, which is more compact, lighter, does most of the same things just as well, except for that time-lapse feature, and just has a smaller battery. That's where they save their money, that's where they save their weight. It's 80 bucks, $10 less. These are small differences here, but sometimes those small differences are big to some people. But compared to the Q2, which is my favorite, this is $120, it's more. And DJI has recently come out with their new Osmo 4. It's 150 bucks. They've gone back up field. So although it has some pretty sweet features like the magnetic connection, it really prices itself out of the range of this one, and it is a bit bigger. So overall, I can't give it a great rating for value, but it is still less than the DJI option. I'm gonna give it a 7 out of 10. So conclusion, that's a total of 36 out of 50. Let's get this compact again. That's not that compact, is it? So as you can see, when we compare these things with the Hohem, the Smooth X, Smooth Q2, and our current contender, the Moza MX, it's kind of beefy. It really plays the big battery life gambit. And that would be more useful to me if there was a power out into your phone, but I don't think there is. So this one's a bit of a tough sell for me. Unfortunately for most people, I would much sooner recommend the iSteady X, or if you really want something nice in the hand that already has a great grip, I would say the Q2. But if you need something with the best battery life in a small compact gimbal, even though it's a bit awkward in the back pocket, it does fit. This is going to be the one for you. It's the battery life king. So, if you have any questions about this, let me know down in the comments. If you have it yourself and have some thoughts about it, let me know down in the comments. I'd love to hear your thoughts. If you want to buy any of these things, I've got links down in the description. If you buy from those links, they're affiliate links that help support me, support my channel, and feed my family. So, until next time, keep your pockets clear and ready. Go take some photos.